Welcome to the Gentleman's Guide to Vampires. Neonate, as we continue our foray through the Cainites of the East, that is, opposed to the Kindred of the East, how I understand you refer to the Kuei Jin at times, it occurs to me that while we have discussed the Nagaraja, we did not come to the conclusion as to the genesis of their name, so allow me to educate you. Listen closely, you may learn something. The Nagaraja, quite simply translated, means Serpent King, Naga Raja. A curious epithet, considering that the bloodline has no connection to snakes and none to kings. They are flesh-eating vampires. They are not held in high regard by any, and they certainly have no connection to the Setites of repute that I consort with. Now, let's see. Were the Nagaraja known as the Nagaraja when they were mortal? No. Were they known as the Nagaraja immediately after they discovered the powers of Cainite vitae and alchemically induced themselves into the undead state? No. When the Nagaraja first became vampires, they were known as the Chakravanti vampires, or indeed the Euthanatos vampires to others. To some, they were known as a bloodline of Clan Cappadocian, and to others, they were known as a bloodline of Clan Ventru, depending on which clan was taking responsibility at any given moment, but I can guarantee no vampire of repute would want to connect himself to one of the flesh-eaters. Either way, they were not known as the Nagaraja when they first came into the night. So where did they acquire this peculiar title? Well, I will tell you. Despite my disregard for this bloodline, they are impeccable scholars, especially when it comes to the realms of the undead. They have the ability to travel into the Shadowlands perhaps like no other, and manipulate spirits thusly. Through their actions in the True Black Hand, especially whilst based in what is now Pakistan and India, the Chakravanti vampires were able to recover the shadows of ancient tomes that referred to a caste of vampires that hailed from the Zhonggu of old, the Chinese warring states. Now, these Chinese vampires, the Golong, or Guo Long, depending on your transliteration, were great rulers, practiced in a peculiar form of blood magic, and indeed they commanded the awe, the respect of all other Cainites around. The Nagaraja saw this as an opportunity. They were being quite heavily persecuted when they first came into the night, as you can expect. So they appropriated the name. These Golong had been disappeared for perhaps 500 years, according to record. They were all but vanished into history. There seemed to be no reason for it, mind you, but they were gone. And so they thought, if they appropriate the title, they had their form of necromancy, their vitreous path, their nihilistics, and yet they felt they could probably pass it off as whatever it was that the Golong used to wield. After all, no one knew where they were and who was going to argue with them. And perhaps by doing so the Nagaraja would be able to gain a foothold over other vampires in the territory, the Jiangshi, the, well, other bloodlines that we have not quite covered. So, the Nagaraja did this. They became the Serpent Kings, because the Golong means Dragon Kings, and that was the closest they could really get without stealing the name wholesale. And I believe they did for a time, until the Golong came back. They came back as if, well, they knew about the Nagaraja's actions all along. The Nagaraja had barely had time to appear in what passes for Elysium in that part of the world, and exalt themselves as rulers of Cainites in that geographical location, before the Golong were appearing en masse, in earnest, and they were not happy that a bunch of flesh-eating usurpers had decided to say, oh, by the way, we are the descendants of the Golong, or in fact, we are the Golong entire. The number of them that appeared was alarming to me, to the Nagaraja, and probably to every other Cainite in that area, not least to the Kuei Jin, who they welcomed with about as much warmth as they welcomed the Nagaraja. The Kuei Jin by this time were really driving down the Jiangshi to a point where they were staying quite well hidden. They were practicing their mastery of obfuscate slightly more in this time. And so when the Golong came back, it was like a rallying cry. The Jiangxi welcomed them with open arms. They assisted them against the Kuei-jin and against the Nagaraja, and the Nagaraja were driven back to India, resulting in the Golong being perhaps the ruling caste of vampires in China. Now, that is how they have remained. They have never disappeared again, and where they had disappeared to until that point, for 500 years, is unknown. I mean, I can speak for vampires being incarcerated in a place they do not wish to be for an overly long period of time, but that did not appear to be the Golong's way. Their reappearance was all too remarkable. Right on the money. They knew exactly when the Nagaraja were about to move, and they reacted accordingly. So, there are many theories that purport the Golong were hidden in the astral, one of these supposed planes aside from our own in the shadow. Others purport that they were all in torpor, but how would they all know to wake as one? Some, including a Golong that I am familiar with, she goes by the name of Fei Wu now, but that is not how she was once known. She of the Dragon Kings claims that they had never gone away. They were always there, and they weren't even hiding. That the Nagaraja's actions were, well, parallel to that of the Tremere, and in fact they just acted considerably stronger than their cousins among the Zimitzi. I say cousins. There is no defined connection between the Golong and the Zimitzi, except, of course, they share a vaguely similar weakness, not too dissimilar to the Lianons, in fact. The Golong are fiercely territorial, and perhaps this contributed to their waking, if indeed they were asleep at all. If the opposing vampire steps within the territory that the Golong has marked out as his own, then the Golong is very much prone to frenzying, like a Bruja. Now, this is not quite like a Zimitzi needing to sleep in the same place all the time, or a Lianon being tied up to a tree, or damn pagans, how they react. The Golong is tied into the earth in the sense that the earth will make them react to defend it, not in the sense that the Garu preach about Gaia, more like the gangrel and their blood being drawn from the earth as Enoyo makes a merry way beneath it. I digress, anyhow. The Golong, I mentioned they had blood sorcery of a kind. Where most Cainite clans have 3 disciplines, it could be said that the Golong have 4. They are fierce combatants, titans, certainly. They can move in the blink of an eye, they have celerity, and indeed they can withstand many a blow. They have fortitude as well. But they also can hold their innate clan discipline of Long Ban Fa, which can, in a Serpentis style, afflict them with a radiant armour of scales, multicoloured, bejewelled practically, and indeed they can gain the eyes of the serpent and the peculiarly talons of the beast that the gangrel can exhibit. So they have some weird, well, hybrid discipline there. But not only that, they have this blood sorcery, the Long Mo Shu, which I understand some of them find very difficult to master, while others practically excel at it. And this discipline of Long Mo Shu allows them to manipulate the elements, shall we say, weather control. They can control the tidal waves, the ocean, and other such things. Now, they have it said that the Tremere stole these paths of thaumaturgy from them. It could easily be said that the Long Mo Shu is a form of thaumaturgy, but their mastery over these has far excelled any Tremere that I have ever witnessed. So perhaps they are somewhat like the Assamites, having their different castes of vizier and such, that some of the Golong excel in the more martial field and other among the more sorcerous style. Now, they are a very lucky bloodline. It is said that the Golong may repeat their actions. They can practically turn back time. If they get something wrong, they can take a step back. It makes them appear powerful. You should be in awe of them. Indeed, I would agree, you should be. But much of this talk that I give you is apocryphal, for the Golong are quite a paranoid clan. While they will rule, and while they will accept your fealty, they will very rarely teach any of their clan's secrets, and so perhaps the real reason for their striking out against the Nagaraja in such a fierce way was not for the Nagaraja appropriating their name, but for the Nagaraja discovering something about their past. After all, the Nagaraja found various historical scrolls and the like, and tablets surrounding the origins of the Golong, who I believe to be a full-blooded clan of Cain for their disciplines, their weaknesses. They just do not mirror one of our clans closely. Not closely enough. Especially in the sense that they grow unnaturally bright with age. This is one of my favourite myths of the Golong, and yet something that I am told reliably that does happen. You know that an Assamite gets darker and darker skinned until they are practically onyx. The Golong glow. They glow as they get older, and until they are an almost radiant light, until they have to essentially sink into torpor to make this light dim. I am told that when they struck out against the Nagaraja and the Kuei Jin, despite the Kuei Jin fighting them in equal force, these Golong, when awoken, were no lower than 7th generation. 7th through to rumoured 4th generation Dragon Kings awoke from the earth and struck out against the Kuei Jin. They had never embraced less than 7th. That may be different in this night, though that was around a millennium ago, but they have remained since then, and they have made no overtures towards the Camarilla. They have made absolutely zero overtures towards the Sabbat that they seem to rankle at entirely. They have no love for Tremere, and any Tremere diplomat that has tried making his way to Shanghai has found short shrift with the Golong, and of course they despise the Nagaraja. But they are not a part of the Tal Mahira, so where do they belong? Do they belong to a sect at all? I have heard from a contact of mine or two, who claims to be a monitor for the Inconnu, that the Golong, every member, belongs to that august sect. I have not discussed the Inconnu at length, and that is because there is not much to discuss. There is very little that is known of the Inconnu, except that they like to watch others. Perhaps it is that the Dragon Kings were watching all of us, and they were watching their own homeland as well, and as soon as the Nagaraja stepped up, they stepped out of the Inconnu. They could remain hidden no longer. This besmirchment of their honour, their great legacy, was too much for them. They do not have cool or indeed friendly relations with many clans of the east or west, and yet they hold on to their ground with a vice-like grip due to how many elders make up this clan, so few neonates. They are loyal to one another, such in a way that is not too dissimilar to the Voldery, which raises up further questions about them. I am sure that if all of the Asian clans rose up as one to wipe out the Golong, they would be able to do so. But why would they? The Golong protect China, which you could refer to as the heartstone of the Asian kingdoms. Without the Golong, perhaps the Kuei Jin would dominate entire. The Jiangxi seem perfectly content to hide in the shadows, to act as counsel, and to, well, do the light work while the Golong do the heavy lifting. Does that perhaps remind you of the Toreador and the Ventru, perhaps? The Golong are an interesting clan, no doubt. Their powers, well, they boggle the mind. Their age is truly daunting and reminds me of my own little bloodline. And so, I would ask that if you ever come across one of these Golong and they are feeling talkative, do try and hatch from them exactly where they were for 500 years, what they were doing and what their plans are, because if their plans affect the rest of the Cainites of Eurasia, then we may well have something or a few things to worry about.